Good morning. When 1970 came around, it brought a wild and wonderful look of absolute freedom. And that brought it to my Uncle Victor Charles, and also to me. Victor Charles wanted to dance in this sexual atmosphere. And millions also joined along with him too. It's a pity, because my Uncle Victor Charles had the right for freedom, but others wanting him to stop dancing. During 1970, my father Sonny purchased a single-story house at Devon Ct in South Mission Beach, and it was only a 2-minute walk away from my Auntie Suzy's double-story house on the boardwalk. My Uncle Tony was married and living in Hermosa Beach, and my Uncle David Francis was also married and living in Manhattan Beach, California. They were only about a 7-minute drive away from each other's houses. I lived with my father for a short while, and in September of 1970 I moved to Waialua, Hawaii, with my girlfriend and her mother. This was the true beginning of my many adventures at 17 years old. Victor Charles gave a very odd bit of information to one of his one-man show audiences, saying, "I will be married for the first time. My fiancée will make the official announcement in 10 days, and she is a set designer. It was a long search for me to find the woman I wanted to marry, and this one can do things with an iron to shirt a collar." He was most likely referring to his pretend bride-to-be, Peggy Kellner, who has been the set designer and costume designer for many years, starting in 1954 at the Oak Globe Theater in San Diego, California. This little bit of interest, before or later, never was brought up by him ever again. My guess would be he was shielding himself from being seen gay from the public, and by saying this little tiny white lies, he created a different image of him in their eyes. He most definitely lived out his life as a bachelor. And Peggy Kellner had only married once, and that man wasn't my Uncle Victor Charles Buono. I just now giggled after writing this bizarre episode of his life. On March 14, 1970, Victor Charles was performing his one-man show at the Knife and Fork Club of Davenport, Iowa, and he said, "My thesis is that in order to make a theater, you must have a storyteller and a listener." When Victor Charles witnessed the beginning of the 1970s, he probably couldn't understand why he was having such bad luck. It wasn't that he was performing poorly, but it might have been his new agent not getting quality roles for him in television, on stage theaters, and in motion pictures. I did hear that his new agent embezzled him, and the agent was taken to court, found guilty, and he served time in prison. He also had to turn over his property in Apple Valley, California, into the hands of my Uncle Victor Charles. I haven't the date of the year this took place, but it had to have happened between 1970 and 1974. That was when Victor Charles relocated to his new Apple Valley Ranch near Victorville, California, and he lived there for the rest of his life. Unfortunately, Victor Charles's woes were not over with, because there was still one motion picture in 1970 that he had performed in that would be his very worst reviews to date. The motion picture was titled Up Your Teddy Bear in June 4th, 1970. The major actors were Julie Newmar, Wally Cox, and Victor Charles. The film was chock full of nudity and nasty dialogue, and it truly was one of the most bizarre motion pictures that he had placed his name on. It was now coming back at him like a screaming tornado throughout numerous bad reviews in newspapers across America. That was the conclusion of the productions Victor Charles performed in 1970. This must have been a wake-up warning for him that if he had another year like that, he just might have to go on unemployment. In the 1960s, that made him a star on stage, in television, and in motion pictures were now ancient Hollywood history. He needed to reinvent himself as who he was in the eyes and minds of his audiences throughout America. It was an absolute must or break. And that is exactly what he started to do in 1971 by traveling through numerous states of America, giving his solo one-man performance of reciting classic stories, prose, and comedic poetry. He had to live up to his prior creative victories of winning 3 Atlas Globe Awards for Best Actor of the Year at the Oak Globe Theater and getting an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor in the Motion Picture, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. A whole brand new decade was facing him, and he was definitely up for the challenge of his lifetime by not giving up. It was 1971. I was 18 years old and I was living in Los Angeles, California. I was working on a Coachella date farm under the hot summer sun near the ending of the year, and I soon relocated up to Burlington, Washington. My father, Sonny, was still living alone in South Mission Beach and enjoying his bachelor status while dating various women. It was the early 1970s where you could sleep overnight in a Motel 6 for only $6 and fill up your 12-gallon gas tank for only $3.84. A draft beer then was only 25 cents a glass, and so was a pack of cigarettes. Food was inexpensive, and you could live in a studio apartment near the beach for only $65 per month. The young generation was traveling throughout America, driving their VW buses and living in communes in the rolling hills of California and elsewhere. It was the hippie generation, and I jumped headfirst into a whole new way of life. Victor Charles was quoted in a Wilton Jones article discussing his ability of writing poetry on October 31st. 1971, saying, "Other people doing my material, so when I refused, Mr. Bedell, a very nice man, asked me to do them myself. You might say I know too much about poetry to claim to be a poet. I can joke and rhyme, though. Maybe I'll write a poem someday. I wish I had more time to be bad." With the nomination, my price and my billing had to triple overnight. I had a lot of offers, but no good roles. I took them anyway and went straight into the string of films, each worse than the last. Now I may be fat, but I'm not lazy. I've got to work and I've got to do something to make people love me more. I'm still very much an actor. Nobody intimates me. There are no Victor Buono impressions, and I want to keep it that way. I'm not a character actor, just a fat actor. I could play Romeo, although I need quite a Juliet. They are starting to write TV roles for me now. I play a lot of badman type 47B where I wear silks, look sideways without turning my head and let the hurry beat me up. But I'm not typed. I love food, but I love applause more. So I want to replace me with another and add an extra 20 years to my career. At 33, I shouldn't be tired enough for it to affect my work at the end of the day. What would I do with myself at 190 pounds? My Uncle Victor Charles was absolutely honest with every word he said in this article. I love the one where he said, "Now I may be fat, but I'm not lazy. I've got to work and I've got to do something to make people love me more." This just made me cry of thinking of him.